What you are about to see will change how you see the people around you forever. This is the terrifying true story of the woman who committed Australia's most unthinkable crime. I'm warning you, the final details are so horrific that most people couldn't finish reading the court documents. You have to stick around until the very end to understand the true meaning of evil. Catherine Knight was born on October 24, 1955, in the rural town of Tenterfield, New South Wales, into a family already marred by secrets and scandal. Her mother, Barbara, was locked in a forbidden affair with Ken Knight, a man despised for his drinking and violence. From the moment Catherine entered the world, she was shadowed by chaos, betrayal, and brutality. The story of her life is not a story of sudden darkness. It is a long descent, a slow tightening spiral, where violence was as common as breath, and silence was often more terrifying than screams. She grew up in a home where rage lingered like smoke. Ken Knight was a man known for his temper, a heavy drinker who lashed out at Barbara with fists and fury. Catherine was one of 8 children, but unlike the laughter and bonds that sometimes unite large families, hers was fractured by beatings and endless fear. At school, Catherine was remembered not for brilliance, but for volatility. She had moments of warmth, of almost disarming charm, but when her temper ignited, it was something feral, something beyond control. Teachers saw the unpredictability. Classmates avoided the sharp edges. The girl with piercing eyes learned early that violence could bend others to her will. Her obsession with sharp objects began as a child. She collected them, polished them, displayed them in her bedroom. For Catherine, they weren't tools. They were extensions of herself, silent companions that gleamed in the light and whispered of power. Friends who visited her home found the walls of her room adorned with blades, lined up in neat order like soldiers awaiting command. It wasn't a game, it was ritual. And as the years passed, the sharp objects became not just symbols of her fascination, but the instruments through which her darkest impulses would find voice. In her teenage years, Catherine left school almost illiterate, but found work at a local slaughterhouse. The place reeked of blood and death, but for Catherine, it felt like home. She learned quickly, mastering the art of skinning animals with mechanical precision. Co-workers noticed how she lingered near the sharp cutting utensils, how she seemed transfixed by the act of cutting. For most, the slaughterhouse was work. For her, it was something more. The sight of blood didn't sicken her, it steadied her. When she took her set of cutting utensils home and hung them above her bed, she did it deliberately. She once told people they should always be within reach, just in case she ever needed them. A half-joke, a half-truth, and no one who heard it ever really laughed. Her relationships began like storms, intense, passionate, and destructive. David Kellett was the first man to fall into her orbit. He was already a broken figure, an alcoholic scarred by his own past. Catherine clung to him with ferocity, demanding control, demanding loyalty, demanding that he become both lover and prisoner. On their wedding night in 1974, Catherine tried to unalive him because he fell asleep after intimacy. When he survived, when he stayed, it was not because he wanted to, but because leaving Catherine was harder than enduring her wrath. She maltreated him, humiliated him. Once, when he came home late, she burned his clothes. Another time, she spanked him with a frying pan so hard, he staggered. David Kellett eventually fled, terrified, but he left behind a truth others would learn too late. Catherine Knight was not someone you loved. She was someone you survived. David Saunders came next, another man ensnared by her charm and crushed by her violence. Catherine adored him at first, then turned possessive, jealous, volatile. She once unalived his puppy in front of him as a demonstration of what she could do to him. Saunders tried to leave, but Catherine knew how to pull him back, through threats, through pregnancies, through the false warmth of apologies that never lasted. When he did escape, he carried scars not only on his body, but deep inside his mind. John Chillingworth, too, found himself drawn into her orbit. Their relationship was shorter, but no less marked by violence. He fathered a child with Catherine, but when he realized her cruelty, he distanced himself. Catherine did not grieve the loss. She merely moved on to her final, most tragic conquest. John Price was a man well-liked in the community of Aberdeen. Friends called him Pricey, a reliable worker, a father of three, a man who loved life in simple ways. He enjoyed his job in the mines, enjoyed evenings at the pub, enjoyed time with his children. But he also had a soft heart, a forgiving nature, and when Catherine entered his life, he overlooked the warnings. She could be sweet, she could be magnetic, she could make a man feel like he was the center of the universe. At first, Pricey believed he had found companionship. What he had actually found was a sentence. Catherine moved into his home, bringing with her the cutting utensils she always hung above her bed. Neighbors heard their arguments. Pricey's friends begged him to leave, to escape while he could. But Catherine's hold was suffocating. She knew how to reel him back with gestures, with charm, with apologies that masked the looming storm. Pricey, like those before him, underestimated the depth of her cruelty. And by the time he realized the danger, it was far too late. By early 2000, their relationship had reached its breaking point. Catherine pierced Pricey in the chest during an argument, but he survived and threw her out of his house. Friends thought it was over, but Catherine didn't vanish. She waited. She returned with apologies, with seduction, with promises to change. And John Price, against every warning, let her back in. By February, he had told co-workers he feared for his life. He even showed them his will, stripped of Catherine's name, and confessed that she had made promise to unalive him if he didn't marry her. "If something happens to me," he said, "it will be because of Catherine." Those words, half a warning, half a prophecy, hung in the air like a curse. On February 29, 2000, Pricey came home late. He spoke with neighbors, went inside, and settled into bed. Catherine arrived later, calm, carrying her cutting utensils. She showered, dressed in lingerie, and joined him in bed. To the outside world, the night was quiet. Inside the house, an unspoken dread thickened the air. John Price drifted into uneasy sleep, his body weary, his mind perhaps already haunted by premonition. What happened in the early hours of March first unfolded in silence, broken only by breath, by movement, by the weight of inevitability. Catherine rose from the bed, her cutting utensils waiting for her. The house was still. Shadows clung to the walls. The air carried the scent of her perfume, faint, almost mocking. She moved with deliberate slowness, every step heavy with intention. When she attacked, it was sudden, violent, but it was not chaos, it was ritual. Pricey woke in terror, fighting, struggling, his body colliding with walls, leaving bloodstains on doorframes as he tried to escape. He stumbled through the hallway, reaching for the door, but Catherine dragged him back into her storm. Neighbors later found the trail he left behind, silent evidence of a desperate man's last moments. The details of what Catherine did after are matters of record, but their full horror lies in the silences, in the pauses where imagination does the rest. The cutting utensils she had adored since childhood were no longer symbols. They were instruments. The house became a chamber of shadows, of stillness, of grotesque transformation. By the time the sun rose, John Price was gone, and Catherine was lying in bed, calm, as though nothing had happened. When police arrived, alerted by concerned neighbors and Pricey's absence from work, the house told its story in fragments. The blood, the silence, the overwhelming sense that violence had not just occurred, but lingered, soaked into the walls. Officers found Catherine unconscious, having taken pills in an apparent attempt at escape, but alive. She was arrested and charged with the life-taking of John Price. The trial drew national attention, not just because of the brutality of the crime, but because of the chilling composure of Catherine Knight. She pleaded guilty, sparing the jury the details, but her silence was not mercy, it was control. She offered no explanation, no remorse, no words at all. The judge, in sentencing her to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, the first woman in Australia ever to receive such a sentence, called her actions appalling and beyond human comprehension. She was taken to Silverwater Women's Correctional Center, where she remains to this day, a figure both infamous and unreachable, silent behind the walls she built for herself. The legacy of Catherine Knight is not just in the crime she committed, but in the way it continues to haunt those who hear it. In Aberdeen, people still speak of Pricey with sorrow, remembering the man he was before he became a name tied forever to horror. They speak of Catherine too, but not with sympathy. Her story is a cautionary tale, a reminder that evil does not always appear as a monster in the dark. Sometimes it appears as a partner, a lover, a figure who smiles, apologizes, and then waits. The silence she carries in prison is as chilling as the crime itself. She does not confess, does not explain, does not beg. She simply endures, as though she has achieved the one thing she always desired, which is control. And so the story of Catherine Knight endures, not because of the details that remain in court documents, but because of the atmosphere it leaves behind. A sense of dread, of inevitability, of the fragile line between love and terror. She was born into violence, she lived in violence, and she ended her freedom through violence. Her cutting utensils, once trophies above her bed, now rest as exhibits in history's darkest cabinet. And the echo of her crime is not in the blood, not in the silence of that house, but in the way it forces us to look at the people beside us and wonder what shadows they might carry, what silences they might be keeping, and what horrors might one day step quietly out of the dark. Now you've seen how Catherine Knight's life unraveled into one of the darkest stories in Australian history. What do you think about the warnings John Price gave before his final days? Do you believe Catherine's obsession was shaped by her past, or was it pure choice? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more.